If you're someone who finds themselves fixed in this postural position that tends to bias extension, then chances are you are probably dealing with one or an assortment of issues. Having been someone who dealt with pain in this very posture and dealt with things like thoracic outlet syndrome and chronic lower back pain, I can attest to how frustrating it can be. So without further ado, let's not waste any time, and we're gonna jump right into the goods to get you from here to here. So there's a few different things that are going on as it relates to a posture that tends to bias overextension, or we'll say even hyperextension, through areas like your knees, maybe your hips, or your lower back. What we're going to specifically focus on to begin is working on the level of extension tone right around your lower back through your lumbar, and getting access to breathing and bringing pressure into the posterior side or the back side area of your ribs. So what you're gonna need for this is, you can use 2 yoga blocks. You can also use 2 books or 2 square objects of similar size. And what we're gonna work on is that capacity to bring pressure into this section back here. Because if I am biasing overextension through here, then chances are a lot of my breath is either gonna be going into my belly or into my upper ribs on the front side. So we're gonna come into somewhat of a all fours position. You're gonna take the tool of your choice on the front side of your knees. Elbows are gonna come back. And what we're gonna work on here is driving your elbows down into the block this way while you're driving your knees up. So we're creating kind of this opposing force against one another. And we're gonna use that to not round out as hard as we can. We're gonna try to keep some length through the spine, but we're gonna use that resistance to create a little bit of frontline feedback in an attempt to create some posterior expansion. So once I have that set up, and I have my knees driving into my elbows, elbows driving into my hands, being mindful I'm not in overextension, we'll say through the pelvis here, just kind of keeping that tailbone gently pushed back. We're gonna start to take a breath in. We're gonna go slow exhale, and I want you to try to bias the front side of your body in the process of that. And now when I come back into my inhale, I'm gonna try to regather and build on that space in through the back ribs. And what you should feel here is kind of this growing of length right around this section of your back. And what I try to envision is from the top of my hips right all the way up to my mid-back, I'm feeling the breath kind of grow in between those 2 points. What I would suggest here is building on that aspect of the breathing and spend anywhere between about 60 to 90 seconds breathing in that position, trying to create about a 5 to 6 second inhalation, take about a 1 second pause at the top, and then 5 to 6 second exhalation. So another reason as to why your body might bias this overly extended position is due to where your center of mass is in space and how your body is trying to organize itself around that center of mass. So you can imagine if my knees overly extend, my center of mass shifts forward, my upper body really has nowhere to go but backwards to try to counter this force here. So now that we have some space in through the back ribs and you have a felt sense of what it feels like to bring some pressure into there, what we can do is grabbing the same tool of your choice from the previous exercise. I'm going to use a yoga block here again. We're going to work through a lunging motion, trying to maintain some of that pressure through the back ribs and just get a better sense of what it feels like to have our center of mass a little bit more stacked as we move up and down. So we're gonna take our arms slightly in front here because we wanna get used to pushing the ribs back this way to get out of this overly extended position. So we wanna try to get the ribs slightly shifted back. We can come into a split stance. So I have my right leg in front. And what we're gonna start to do is lunge down without leaning forward, without leaning back. We're just trying to stay relatively stacked here. We're gonna come down as low as we comfortably can. And now without overly leaning back as we start to stand up, we're gonna try to keep that center of mass relatively square by pressing through the midfoot, and we're just gonna come up to this point here. So my knee isn't even fully extended on this lead leg. I'm keeping a soft bend in it. We can take a breath, attempting to access some of the posterior ribs here. And then we're gonna try to sustain some of that as we re-drop back down. And then a smooth press away from the floor coming back up. What I would suggest here is on the way down, try to come down over about a 3 to 5 second window. And now as you're standing up, try to have that tension kind of smoothly building as you start to come into more of this neutral position. Work both sides here for anywhere between about 8 to 12 reps at that tempo of 3 to 5 down and 3 to 5 back up. Now, because we're human beings and we don't live in a static position where everything can be perfect all the time, it's actually important to practice the movement pattern of the tension and the pressure relationship that we're working on throughout our corrective work. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our lunging exercise that we're working on here, and we're gonna build on that a little bit. So grab same tool of your choice. Now, instead of having your elbows in front here, you're gonna bring your elbows out this way. So you're making kind of this diamond shape, and you can create a little bit of a squeeze against the block here. And what we're gonna work on is attempting to not falter back into being overly extended as we start to move through that motion in a more dynamic way. So what this is gonna look like is we're gonna start with your feet just together. Arms are gonna create that diamond shape. They're coming up. And again, I want you to notice my arms are here, so we're getting used to the ribs being in this position to not be here. So if you're noticing you're in a lot of retraction through the scapulas, just be mindful of that and see if you can actually get a little bit of protraction. Now, once you're there, we're gonna take a step forward. I'm gonna come into my right side. I'm gonna go into a little bit of a rotation, and then I'm gonna come back to standing. Now I'm gonna take a step into my left. So I'm gonna alternate into my left and back, into my right and back. What I'm trying to feel here is that as I come back to my base here, I don't come back to that position. I try to come back to more of that neutral base, and I'm trying to feel that connection of the legs, the ribs, and the shoulders as I start to move through this a little bit more dynamically. And practicing this is gonna be what ultimately starts to translate to your movement in a more unconscious way. So it's really important to take the corrective and strength work and add some type of movement application to it. And what I would recommend in terms of rep range here is anywhere between about 12 to 14 on each side. You can kind of vary the intensity and use this as a way to get your heart rate up, say at the middle or towards the end of your workout, or you can even go through something like this as a warm-up to get your body primed for the training that you have ahead. As always, if you like this video, throw it a like, you can subscribe, and while you're here, why not go check out another video that the YouTube algorithm thinks you will enjoy that's related into the body in some way right here. I'll catch you there.